Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Maya is a lactation consultant, a sleep coach, and the founder of Milkcare, an online wellness store for breastfeeding mothers and babies. Maya also teaches a course for lactation consulting and sleep coaching professional trainings. Thank you so much for joining me today, Maya. I'm very excited to chat like lactation, but even more specifically, increasing milk supply, which I think is something that so many parents are worried about and are wondering what they can do. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This is definitely something I'm excited about. And increasing milk supply means more babies get more breast milk. So what could be better than that?
Right. I love it. And I think that there's so many different perspectives out there when it comes to milk supply on can you increase it? What can you do? And everything in between. So I'm excited. Do you want to start by telling people a little bit about you? And I know your bio will play before this, but if you wanted to share a little bit about you and how you got into the lactation world and kind of what offerings you bring to the community.
When I had my first baby, who's now 12 years old,
Oh my goodness.
I struggled a little bit with breastfeeding, and then I had this amazing lactation consultant come and help me. And I said, wow, this is an amazing job that I never knew existed. And it can bring so much help to so many people in such a short period of time, because an hour the lactation consultant can change someone's life. So I was so excited by that, and I knew it was my calling. So I immediately started my training, and here I am 12 years later. I've been an IBCLC for at least 7 years now, and a lactation consultant for about 11 years. And in the last few years, I've also trained as a sleep coach, holistic, gentle sleep coach.
That's awesome.
And also I've developed a brand called Milkcare that caters specifically to breastfeeding mothers' needs in all kinds of wellness issues, among them increasing milk supply, baby gas and colic, stress reduction, and a lot of other things. So it's just especially for breastfeeding moms.
That's so amazing that you're doing that. I love that. And I am sure you'll share some more about that soon. So we'll definitely have to loop back to that one. But to start with, I'd love to hear a little bit about, when you are working with clients, is increasing milk supply typically one of the big topics that you guys are talking about? And like, what kind of suggestions do you typically have for people?
Well, first thing that I noticed is a lot of parents are occupied with their milk supply. Do I have enough milk? Do I feel that I need to increase my milk supply? These are questions I get all the time, and people are really obsessed with the amount of breast milk they have. A lot of the times I find that the issue is not their actual milk supply, but their perception of what breastfeeding should look like. So a lot of this is just misunderstanding what breastfeeding is. So when people feel like they don't have enough milk, first of all, I have to see, is the problem the perception? So first of all, I make sure that people understand that breastfeeding is not bottle feeding. I call it speaking bodilese when someone, it's a special language, the language of bottles. And bodilese has really seeped into all our communications about baby feeding. So things like feeding every 3 hours, that's in bodilese. It has nothing to do with the language of breastfeeding, because breastfeeding babies feed much more often than that. And
Right.
when we look into cultures where bottles have not come into the culture, we see, and these are studies that were made with breastfeeding mothers in Africa who have not been exposed to the bottle feeding culture. And we see that the rate of breastfeeding is about 4 times an hour, all the way up till 18 months.
Wow.
So if someone is feeling like my baby wants to feed every hour and a half, that's still pretty Western as far as the breastfeeding goes. I mean, that baby has been cultured to Western breastfeeding, but still the mom would feel that the baby's breastfeeding really often.
Right.
And actually, no, it's pretty not. It's even less often than would be normal.
Right.
So first of all, we want to look at the perceptions and see, are you speaking bodilese? Do you think your baby should be feeding every 3 hours? And then a lot of those worries will be gone because you'll just know, oh, okay, my baby's supposed to be feeding this often.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is also like almost a social media thing too, right? I think a lot of parents see online. I'm always telling my clients, you're going to see online and kind of prepare, right? Everyone buys these giant deep freezers and they're expecting to be, having so much milk, they're going to have this giant freezer stash or something like that. And often having that much of a stash means that you're an overproducer. In order to be producing enough milk, you really just need enough to feed your baby to be satisfied. And I think that people are so, like you said, so occupied in, am I producing enough? Is my baby being fed enough? So that kind of leads me to the other question. What is a proper amount of milk production for, different age brackets, and how can exclusively or breastfeeding parents as a whole, when they are breastfeeding, know that their baby's getting enough, and can they kind of know how much their baby's getting, or is that kind of no, obviously not as possible in comparison to when you're feeding a bottle, right?
It actually is possible. So I think it's a really good place to start from because it is possible to know if your baby's eating enough. I'm so tired of seeing those commercials for pumps or whatever it is, where you see these bottles that the mom's pumping and supposedly she just got 2 full, huge bottles of milk from her 2-minute. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
When you know the statistics. So the statistics are about 30 milliliters, 1 ounce, give or take, of milk per letdown. And we would get that for about, in a pumping session, let's say, we would get 1 letdown, maybe 2. That would be normal
Okay.
for me. If you're pumping from both sides, that's what you would get. So if you're pumping just one side or you only have 5 minutes to pump, if you're expecting more than that, you might be disappointed.
Right.
So first of all, we have to understand that's normal. Getting your 1 ounce, that's wonderful. That means you have enough not only to feed your baby, but to pump an extra letdown for your for your stash. Okay,
Yeah.
so
And then I'm wondering now, is that kind of an across the board measurement, or is that typically for like the certain, like first X amount of months or something like that?
So it is across the board. It doesn't apply, of course, to the first days. So
Okay.
in the first days of life, the first 24 hours, when we're still producing colostrum, we'll see about 2 to 5 milliliters per 3 hours. And this is very important. It's not once every 3 hours, like we think when we're speaking bodilese. We're talking about per 3 hours. So a mom she could produce this as the 3 hours are unfolding. So her baby would go on, off, on, off. If we're trying at one sitting to get this 2 to 5 by expressing manually, it'll be very hard. I mean, it'll take us a really long time. So we're not expecting this in one sitting. It's per 3 hours. And then as the days go by, we'll see about 10 milliliters more for each 3 hours every day. So if the first day we were expecting her to get 2 to 5, the second day it would be 10 to 20, and so on. Until we reach that mark of getting about, it's not every mom will get the 1 ounce. Some will get more, some will get less. Okay, but that's the average.
Okay.
And then it stays the same, and that's the amazing thing about breast milk, that a baby, if that's bottle fed, okay, breastfed babies, they'll get the 1 ounce, and then they'll get a little more, and then a little less, and they'll get it along those 3 hours. But when we feed a baby at one sitting, let's say every 3 hours with the bottle, they'll get about 2.5 ounces, 80, 90 milliliters of breast milk. And that'll stay the same throughout the breastfeeding. Whereas with a formula feeding, we'll have to increase the amount.
Right. And that's something I think so many people are misconceived about, right? Like you were just saying, about 1 ounce every hour, and that's kind of across the board for, even, months down the road, which can be so scary because then people would think, okay, well, how am I supposed to have enough milk to feed my baby then when they get older and they're hungrier? And some babies do want more, right? But it's the understanding I'm always trying to explain to people that formula is like measured per ounce, right? In a way that there's a certain amount of nutrients and calories in each ounce and in each scoop of that powder or whatever you're using. Whereas my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, that breastfeeding, the content of the milk is changing constantly, right? So there may be more fat content or, different things in it that makes it help your baby last a little bit longer as they get older and not need as much milk as they would if they were having a formula bottle. Is that correct?
Exactly, because the formula doesn't change, we have to increase the amount. But breast milk is versatile. It changes throughout the months, and it's specifically tailored to that baby and their needs. That's the amazing thing, that breastfeeding is a conversation between your body and your baby's body. So the baby is always signaling to the mom, what do I need in terms of calories, proteins, in terms of immunity? The baby's always sending feedback, and then the mom's body can respond. So it's really this conversation, and it's very intricate and makes the milk change throughout the months. And of course, that can't happen with formula.
Now, I had a client ask me this question as you were talking about that. It made me remember. They were at the point where they were going to start, the milk in the freezer was going to start going bad. And they were like, if I'm starting to pull milk from when baby was super little and now baby is, say, 5, 6, whatever months old, the milk content is very different, I'm sure. So do you typically suggest that then they may need more or may want to eat more, may want to eat sooner than they typically do after that? Or are you telling clients earlier on, like, hey, let's try to cycle through the freezer milk, within the month or something like that, so that it is kind of the same content in the milk? What kind of suggestions do you have when it comes to that?
Well, that's a question that a lot of parents ask because we get the freezer stash really full.
Right.
We don't waste it, but we also want the milk to be tailored to the baby's age. So first of all, if you have milk and you're thinking, should I give the breast milk or formula? Because maybe my milk is not tailored for my baby anymore. The first thing is definitely use the breast milk because it'll always be better. If you can alternate between fresh milk and frozen milk and get that fresh milk in too, that's really good for a lot of reasons. The immunity, and the other factors of the milk. But if you can't get that fresh milk in, you definitely use your frozen milk. So if you're doing fresh and frozen, you could do about half and half. Some people even mix it in the same bottle, just try to have some fresh milk and some frozen milk. And it also helps with the taste, because sometimes the taste of the frozen milk is a problem.
Interesting. Okay, cool. That's great to know. I love that. So if people are now listening and they are, feeding their baby, but their baby doesn't seem to be satiated, and is wanting to eat. I know you said it's very normal for them to want to eat, but say they go to the pediatrician or something like that and baby's not gaining weight. So they're really starting to become worried about baby's weight gain and calorie intake and milk production and all of that. What kind of things do you suggest that they try out first? I know some people say pump before a feed, pump after a feed, nurse this way or that way, nurse longer. Like, what kind of things do you find work the best when it comes to those first steps of trying to get baby to, gain a little bit more weight and produce a little bit more milk?
So first of all, circling back to what we were saying in the beginning, we can know if a baby is getting enough milk through these signs that are pretty obvious, and they would come up with the pediatrician if something was wrong. So
Okay.
First of all, we have our diaper output. Okay, so we want to be conscious that our baby is giving us a normal diaper output, okay, according to their age. And that's a really good sign that a baby's eating enough. We would want to see a normal weight gain, okay? And it's very important to remember that a baby is supposed to gain a minimum of 150 grams per week until they're 4 months old, and then 80 grams per week from then on.
Okay.
So
So I find, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, so I find that a lot of clients that I work with, when they have babies that are born very small, their pediatricians are like, we need to up this weight. We need to up this weight. And then they may go back the following week for a weight check and baby's gained weight, but they're still under the curve. So do you typically then like agree with pediatricians that, we need to still get the weight up even more? Or are you saying, okay, because they gained this much amount from last week to this week, they're still kind of in a sweet spot?
I always say that, especially with the babies that were born with a lower weight and they're smaller, it makes no sense to try to speed up their weight gain. They're slow gainers. They were in utero, and that's why they're small. So there's no need to put that kind of pressure on those moms. And if the baby's gaining normally, that's all we want from them. Okay, we just want the normal weight gain. We're not going to try to speed it up. And if they're small, and they might be smaller, then we want to look at the family. Is the mom small? Is the dad small? Are these is this a normal curve for that family? So we want to be conscious of that. Definitely not put any extra stress on these people. Okay,
Great. So you said it was 150 grams is typically what we're looking for
per week until the baby's 4 months old.
Okay.
After 4 months, it's only 80 grams.
Cool.
So for
Which
a lot
I did
of
some little
slow gainers, that's a whew moment.
Yes. I was gonna say, I
Not
did
going.
some conversions for some of our things here. For those of you who are listening, Maya's from Israel, so she is using a lot of our metric numbers. So I did some conversion here for those of you listening, so you don't have to look it up, which is 5.29 ounces for those of you listening. But yes, so that's awesome. Okay, so they're gaining some weight a little bit, but we're still wanting to be able to check. So you said, their diaper output, their weight gain, those are all really great ways of being able to tell if they are getting enough, right?
And also we want to see that the breastfeeding feels normal, that it doesn't hurt, that the baby's not doing anything funny at the at the breast, like latching on and off, screaming in the middle, or anything like that. If the breastfeeding sessions feel normal, that's a really good sign that everything's okay.
That's great. Okay, so say one or a few of those things aren't happening, and so they are worried about, milk production. What types of things do you suggest that parents then start doing?
Okay, so the first thing we want to do when we're seeing one of these signs that something is wrong, we're going to try to get more out of each feed. Okay, so when we have the baby at the breast, we want to try to get more out of the feed. So first of all, compressing the breast while the baby is on the breast gets more fat out. So there are studies that show that we can get up to 50% more fat when we compress the breast during the feed. So that's really good. If we're trying to gain weight, getting more fat into the baby is a really good idea. So we want to start with that. Also, we want to feed more often. I hear all the time, I hear people saying, if you want your baby to get more milk, then you should wait between feeds so they'll be hungrier. And that's actually a really bad idea, because if we wait, then we'll just have less opportunity to feed and the baby will take less. Babies won't take more because they're hungrier. That's just misunderstanding the way breasts work. The breast is not going to let down more than the average letdown, or that mom's average letdown, even if the breast is very full. And that brings us to our most important rule, that empty breasts make milk. Full breasts don't make milk. They send a message to the brain saying, hey, we're very full. Please, no more milk. Stop milk production. And then what we get is a decrease in milk production and not an increase. So if we want to get more milk, we definitely want to empty the breast more often. And then if we're thinking about increasing milk supply, we want to empty the empty breast. So we want to pump when the breasts are empty. So you asked, when should we pump, before, after? We want to pump after the feed. And then the breasts are emptier. And then empty breast is getting the message, hey, more milk is needed. So
even pumping an empty breast when you may not be getting any output, or maybe just drops or small amounts, is still good, right? So typically I hear people saying, okay, we pump until kind of like the milk starts to slow down or whatever, and then that's kind of when you know when to stop. Because a lot of people will say, oh, pump for 15 minutes, pump for 30 minutes. I think everybody's a little different, if that's correct, right? Now, if we're pumping breasts that are empty, they may not be having that much of an output. So how do we know how long to be pumping for after a feed?
So a lot of the pump companies, when you ask them, how long should I pump for, they'll say no more than 20 minutes, because that overstimulation of the nipple, it's like skin anywhere. If we overstimulate our skin, we could hurt ourselves. So we don't want to overstimulate. So I wouldn't go for more than 20 minutes. But definitely 20 minutes of stimulation for an empty breast would help us. Even if we don't get any milk, it's still sending the message to the body, more milk is needed.
Okay, that's really great to know, because I do think that sometimes people don't know how long. I mean, especially in the early stages or the first few times that people are pumping, they're often just getting in. They're like, there's so many buttons, there's so many levels. Doing an episode on just pumps is like a whole nother thing that I have on my list, because there's so much to it. Okay.
But another really good thing, if we're still talking about pumps, is power pumping. So power pumping is a way to kind of boot camp your milk supply and get a little boost. So what you can do is have like a really intense pumping session, where there are two ways to do it. One, and it also depends if you're pumping with double-sided pump or just one side. But if you can just, I would say, look up power pumping. It involves pumping for 10 minutes and then taking a break, 10 minutes again, taking a break, and 10 minutes again if you're double-sided. And it's a little different if you're pumping each side. Or the other way is just leaving the pump in somewhere in your house where you see it and you pass by it often, and then kind of for 24 hours, just pumping whenever you walk by your pump. So that really gives your body extra stimulation. And I've heard a lot of moms get more milk with that. And another way to kind of give it a boost is while you're pumping one side, you can manually express the other side, or use one of those cups that kind of latches on and like Haka, and gets the first letdown and then pumping. A lot of moms see when they kind of throw that cup in, they see more milk coming out.
Okay, so now two questions that came up when you were saying that then. I'm like writing things down so I don't forget them. First then, if you're doing this and you're doing this stimulation, how do you know when you should be stopping this continuous overpumping kind of thing? And how do you make sure that you stop and maintain that supply without ending up with an oversupply of milk or in pain?
Power pumping is a one-time thing. That's very important to understand. We only want to do it once every 2-3 weeks at the most. It's not like we want to live like that, power pumping, once a day. I don't think so. So it's just kind of a one-time thing to increase your milk supply. Usually, if a mom sincerely has a problem with her milk supply, we won't have the opposite problem. We won't have the opposite problem where she gets an oversupply from time. I mean, I wish that would be the case. It doesn't happen, but it happens when a mom sets out to increase her milk supply when she actually had no issue with her milk supply. And we talked about that happening way too often. So usually when it's a genuine problem, she can go ahead and power pump and pump after sessions and do all other things that we're going to talk about, and she'll be all right. If it was a misperception, then yes, that could be an issue that she would get an oversupply.
Gotcha. Now, how do we know like when to stop utilizing all of these? Obviously, we're going to talk about some other options too, but like, how do we know when to stop utilizing them, and how do we maintain that supply then if we're not pumping as often? And I guess a lot of people like that, I have clients that have undersupplies are pumping after every feed, and they're like, this is so long because by the time I'm done pumping, baby's about ready to eat again. And they might not be seeing the output that they're wanting. So like, when do you kind of start to see an output, and how do we know when to stop doing so?
So it would take about a week or 2 or 3. I wouldn't be pumping after a feed for longer than that. It's just not sustainable.
Right.
And it's supposed to be a boost for a week or 2, and that's it if you're using the pump. Other ways you can use all through your breastfeeding. The most important thing to remember about increasing supply, I call it the server and the chef, the server and the cook, or the waiter and the cook. So you have to remember both of them. Okay, the server is the oxytocin. Okay, oxytocin makes the breast release milk. Okay, when the baby is latching on, the stimulation from the baby's mouth sends the message to the brain, and oxytocin is released, and the milk cells release the milk. So that's our waiter. We're thinking about that. There are ways to increase our oxytocin. Those ways, usually you can do all through your breastfeeding journey. We'll talk about them in a second. The other important thing is our chef. Our chef is the prolactin. Okay? And when we're trying to increase prolactin, we're thinking about how do we increase the hormone output of our body? How do we get more prolactin produced and sent to the cells to create the milk? So, and those ways usually are those things that we do for a time. like the pumping and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're thinking about the oxytocin. If we want to increase that, all we have to do is things that increase nice feelings in our body. So it's really fun to think about increasing oxytocin. Things like baby wearing. Okay, if we want to take our baby skin to skin and wear them for as long as possible during the day, that alone will give us a boost for our milk supply. Okay, because babies are, they're created, they're coded to being carried all day, and our
Right.
body is coded to carrying our babies. So the moment we put them down and don't carry them, that hurts our milk supply. So we have to understand that carrying is important for our babies. It's important for their posture. It's important for their oxytocin levels. It's important for their development, but it's also important for our milk supply. So we want to carry those babies. We want to carry them skin to skin. That's one. The second thing is we want to sleep with our babies near us, close to us, up against our bodies. Studies show that moms who co-sleep, of course, we want to do it safe, follow the rules, but moms who co-sleep produce more milk. Okay, so that's also helping our waiter do its job, okay, and get the milk out. That also increases prolactin, of course. So co-sleeping with your baby, easy. We want to do that all through our breastfeeding journey. And anything, even people say that while they're pumping, if they look at pictures of the baby, that helps. If you want to create your own guided meditation, okay, just close your eyes, breathe deeply, and just think about your milk releasing. Think about things that calm you. Think about waterfalls. Think about anything that will help you release the milk. That can be super helpful. Okay, so that's our oxytocin. If we're thinking about prolactin, there we really need the stimulation for the breast. That's very important. We can use things to increase to make our body think that prolactin is being produced, okay, like herbal supplements. So that's what I'm really occupied with a lot of my time. What kind of herbs can we put together so we make the body produce more milk, okay? If we're getting ahead of things, okay, if we're getting out there and getting active, we'll want to find moms in the first days of life and help them do something that can't be done after that, okay? Because there are two sides to the story. First side is the body producing the prolactin. The other side is the cell getting the message, okay? So the amount of receptors that each cell has for the message to produce more milk is determined in the first days of lactation. So the more stimulation those cells get, the more receptors they have. And those receptors are like ears for the hormonal message. And if we don't have enough ears, we won't have enough, we won't get enough of that hormonal message, no matter what we do. So if we want to get out there in the first days and tell moms, hey, listen, this is a really good time to just breastfeed as much as possible, wear your baby, sleep with your baby, do everything that you need to do to get those receptors created for your cells. So it's really important. And it also says, well, there might be a limit to how much we could yell at the cell at our bodies. create more prolactin. Well, there might not be enough ears on those cells to hear this message for the body. So if you're taking supplements for a few weeks and you don't see milk increase, then you might want to think about other ways. I mean, maybe increasing the message is just not enough. So.
Gotcha. All right. So that's so many different options for people to kind of like, investigate and try out. I love that. I'm going to have your stuff below. So if people are interested in, chatting with you, if they have low milk supply, definitely reach out to Maya because she can kind of like help you figure out what works best for you. And yeah, is there other things that you can think of that are helpful, or did we kind of name all? I mean, I'm sure there's a million things to do, but those sound like they're the big few things that typically help with milk supply.
One thing we didn't address is just kind of thinking about the breastfeeding itself. Or
Yep.
does the baby have a tongue tie?
Right.
Is the latch good? I mean, we really, if we're seeing trouble with weight gain, we have to address that. I mean, it
Hmm.
might not be the mom, it might be the baby. Okay,
Right.
maybe the baby is just not getting enough, not because the mom doesn't have enough. Okay. And something really important, a lot of times I see moms with an oversupply who think they have an undersupply. Um,
Oh,
so just investigate, do you maybe have an oversupply? Because it sometimes looks the same. We'll see a very unhappy baby at the breast, latching, unlatching, crying, curving their backs, being very hard to put down.
mhm.
Uh, and it could be an oversupply. So definitely we want to rule out other things, just like we said in the
And we
beginning.
typically would rule that out just by pumping or something like that after a feed to see if you have a large output or if it's seeming like they're empty. Is that correct?
We could do that. Some moms don't just they don't have a good relationship with their pumps, so we won't be seeing. We might have an oversupply and still not see
Okay.
the output being a lot, or she could just have a really active milk ejection. So then we see like there won't be a lot of milk, but it'll just be squirting out.
Okay.
So we could typically, first of all, we could use test ways. They're kind of iffy, okay, because there's studies pro and against test weighing, and I'm kind of still thinking about it because I've seen a lot of information. I use it sometimes. I use it and I take it with a grain of salt. I'll weigh the baby before and after, and then before and after a feed. And then if I see that the weight has increased like 300 grams, I'll be like, okay, this baby just got a lot of milk. Okay.
Right.
Even if the test weight is off by 30, 40, 50 grams, we're still
Right.
talking about a lot. So that's something that you might use if you have a baby scale that is very precise. And I mean, a mom can, if you give her the right tools, she can tell if she has an oversupply. Then
Okay.
it'll be pretty obvious once she has the tools to understand.
Okay.
So it
Awesome.
can be rolled out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, check the baby, make sure that the baby's able to take enough milk, that it's the issue isn't with something with the breastfeeding. And just a lot of it is just also learning to trust your body, because we don't trust our bodies.
Right.
We've been taught from the day we were born not to trust our bodies, especially as women. Like when people tell us, no, you're not really in pain, or no, you don't understand what's going on. And we feel kind of disconnected from our bodies. So
Right.
it's really hard for us to say, my body is enough to feed this baby. So the really important message is trust your body. Your body can feed your baby. And your baby can thrive just with your body. Your body's amazing. And that's a really important thing to just tell yourself, I can do this. I know how to do this. I was born to do this. And my baby was born to do this. So
I love that. That's so true. I always like to wrap up with asking if you had, a product or something to recommend to first-time parents, as well as like a piece of advice that you would share. What would you tell them to get? What would you tell them about?
So obviously, because I put a lot of thought and work into creating my formula, if you're gonna use herbal supplements to increase your milk supply, I suggest that you use the formula. It's called Milkcare. The company is called Milkcare, and the product is called White Gold. It was created by a professional herbalist, and I helped with what I saw was working just for moms out in the field, what was
Yeah.
working for them. So we created this really effective formula, and I've seen a lot of success with it. So check it out. It's called White Gold. And we'll even have a code for the moms who want to try to use it and see if it works for them. And a piece of advice is just try to trust your instincts. Always ask questions about advice that you're given, and try to do the research yourself also, and just don't take things at face value. And know that there's going to be a lot of voices out there, and the important thing is to create your own outlook on things and then go with whatever plan that you created.
Yes, I think that's so true. And I will put the links below for Maya's information, as well as the link to find the supplement. So definitely check that out. Thank you so much for joining me and for tackling such a good topic that I think so many people are experiencing and I think will really enjoy. So thank you for joining me, and I'm sure you'll be back and we'll have many other things to talk about.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.